In this video, I'm going to show you how to pick up the stitches along the heel flap to start forming the gusset, and also a little tip for minimizing the holes that tend to appear where you connect the picked up stitches connect with the section that you've already have knit. So there's often little holes that form on each side here, but I'll show you a little tip for minimizing those. So this is what your sock should look like at this point. This is the cuff, and of course this is the mosaic pattern. This is my heel flap and my heel turn. You can see that it's got a little cup there my heel will fit in, and that's the wrong side of the heel flap, so this is what the right side looks like. Now, we've worked across a right side row of the heel flap. So we're at the end of a right side row, and we're getting ready to pick up the stitches down the side of the heel flap. Now, if you are using double point needles, you'll have a needle here in your live stitches, and you'll want to use a second needle for the picking up the stitches. If you are using a long circular, you will simply pull that circular so that your heel flap stitches are down on the cord, and use your needle that was in those stitches to do the pickup. So the slip stitch edge looks a little bit different from a regular edge. You'll see that if you flip it over, because it curls so badly, that there's a line of stitches that look kind of like knit stitches on the wrong side. They're not wrong side stitches, they're just curled so badly they look like they're on the wrong side. We are going to pick up the two strands of those knit stitches in each pickup and knit. So I'm going to demonstrate at first Continental style, and then I'll show you English style. Now the first stitch we pick up is not the one that has the yarn coming out of it. So you want to go down to the stitch just below the one that has the yarn coming out of it. And again, you almost kind of have to turn it over to look at the wrong side in order to find it. And that, in my case, is this stitch right here. So I've got the two strands of that edge stitch on my needle. Let's see if we can focus that. There we go. And I'm going to wrap the yarn and bring up a loop. So that's a pick up and knit. Now the first one's always the hardest. Now the next one, again, I'm flipping it over, almost looking at the wrong side, picking up those two strands that look like a knit stitch, and kind of bring up a loop. We're going to go this way the whole way down the side. And I'll switch to English. You know, I am right-handed, but when it comes to knitting, it's like my right hand doesn't want to work sometimes. There we go. All right. So now the next stitch is this one right here. So I'll get under those two strands. There we go. Wrap the yarn just like I'm knitting and bring up a loop under those two strands. Then go into the next stitch and do the same thing. Go under the two strands of that edge slip stitch, wrap the yarn just like I'm knitting, and bring up a loop. And we will continue to work down this side to the last stitch. I'm not going to bore you with that, so I'll be back in just a moment when I get to the end of my pickups. Okay, I've worked down my whole side, picked up the stitches. You will want to count how many stitches you've picked up because you're going to want to pick up the same number on the other side, but this is what it should look like. You should have a nice, even, consistent stitches. That's the front. And on the back, it looks like this. You've got those little, they look like knit stitches. Those are the slip stitches that you picked up, kind of standing up on the edge there. So I've stopped one stitch before the last slip stitch, And the last slip stitch is the one that the working yarn is coming out of, that you have the stitches on hold. So this is, in my case, it is the opposite color. In your case, it might be the same color as the heel flap. I chose to do my heel flap in the coordinating color instead of the main color. So it's likely that your colors are opposite mine. But anyhow, regardless, using the yarn that you've been using for your pickups, instead of working into that last slip stitch, skip that one and work into the stitch below it. So it's actually going to be the stitch that the yarn is coming out of, the yarn that you have on hold. And work into that stitch. And by skipping that last stitch and working into the stitch below it for your last pickup stitch, it will close up, or at the very least minimize the little hole that tends to form on that side. Then you're going to knit across your held stitches in pattern, and when you get to the other side, you're going to do a similar thing. So when you get to this other side, you're going to continue and pick up the stitches along this heel flap edge. But instead of picking up the first slipped stitch, you're going to pick up the stitch below the first slip stitch, skip the first slip stitch, and then continue like normal to pick up the rest of the stitches. And then once you get those stitches picked up on this side, you'll be ready to continue knitting in the round again.